since this article came out, obviously Briahna Joy Gray and Virgil Texas of Bad Faith Podcast, they released a segment on their show, kind of going through this article. And, I thought it was overall fairly, fair. They gave credit to AOC where it was due, like you just did, Kamali, but they also pointed out that maybe some of these context or statements were framed a little bit out of context. Again, I thought it was pretty fair. I don't really have like a hugely strong opinion on it. I mean, I generally like their commentary, so I thought they made good points. But the writer of this article, Eric London, was pissed. He saw that clip apparently and, was outraged because he took to World Socialist website once again to pin another piece in response to the Bad Faith segment, where he totally calls out Briahna Joy Gray and basically lumps her right in with the bad faith actors such as AOC. And I think Eric London is a good writer. I think he makes a lot of good points in both of his articles. And generally, I totally agree with his sentiment that, AOC and even the DSA to some extent as well kind of funnels people into the capitalist Democratic Party without really mounting a serious anti-capitalist challenge to the two-party establishment. Generally, I fully agree with that sentiment. But again, it seems like he's really upset about this and maybe even a little bit in his feelings regarding Briahna Joy Gray and Virgil Texas and the tone they took. It seems like he's just very incensed over what I saw was, somewhat legitimate or at least good faith criticisms of his framing. I don't think that they were trying to tear him down. I don't think they were trying to stand for AOC necessarily. I just think they were trying to contextualize and maybe prevent just total freak out with no nuance. Again, I don't think it's a problem to try to bring nuance into a situation and understand it over the course of a 30-minute conversation. But again, that being said, I kind of also do understand the frustration of Eric London, being that AOC is still defended by so many people and still, propped up as this revolutionary figure when, funneling people into the Democratic Party is the opposite of revolutionary.
Yeah, I think that I read the first piece, I read this and went through the interview, and I also listened to the Bad Faith clip. And my takeaway from the Bad Faith clip was that this is pretty much what I expected from Bad Faith Pod to take away from it. They were pretty measured. They were like, yeah, we have our criticisms of AOC. I don't think Briahna Joy Gray has ever steered away from her criticisms of AOC. I think she's been pretty vocal about them as far as I've seen. And, while I may have more agreement with Eric London than Briahna Joy Gray does, I think it is more a reaction to the fact that he has his feelings hurt, that somebody with a large platform critiqued his article in a way that he's retaliating and calling her bad faith is, I think, unfair.
Yeah,
right? I think Briahna Joy Gray has stood out as a good faith actor constantly. She's put herself in a position where she's going to stand up for things like Force the Vote, where she's going to, call out people that she's worked with, like Ryan Grimm. She's going to, essentially stand wherever she finds herself. So,
yeah, and also something that annoys me about this article in specific is this quote where it says, "The intervention of Gray in Texas is a sign that the Democratic Party is struggling to contain the fallout over the WSWS exposure of Ocasio-Cortez's interview," basically kind of implicitly expressing that, Virgil Texas and Briahna Joy Gray are like, elements of or members of the Democratic Party that were sent out to, do damage control for AOC, which really is insane if you've paid attention to, Briahna Joy Gray in particular. Again, she literally debated Noam fucking Chomsky about whether or not to vote for Joe Biden. She voted for Jill Stein in 2016. She's anyone but a Democratic Party cheerleader or someone that funnels her audience into the DNC. I just think that's a bit of a character assassination.
They told their whole audience not to vote for Joe Biden.
Yeah, and took a lot of shit for it. Mind you.
Yeah, what do you think, Kamali?
Yeah, I think that she is somebody that as a Black person on the left, I see her. I mean, I think that I can't think of anyone off the top of my head right now whose politics I align any closer with than Briahna Joy Gray consistently. Like she is a sort of, as
white guys in our 20s, I think Gavin and I echo that sentiment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so she's tends to be on the right side of history, and she comes out and she has a way of doing things where she's able to be so diplomatic in her, where she doesn't get down to the, level of any kind of dirt mudslinging or anything like that. She manages to rise above the fray always and just keep like building this unified left that Michael Brooks sort of was able to bridge a lot of gaps. And I think that she's able to do it even in a broader sense, even more broadly than Michael Brooks was able to do. I think some of that is because of her role in the Bernie Sanders campaign and the fact that, I mean, Bernie Sanders campaign, the further we get from the Bernie Sanders campaign, the more amazed I am at how he was able to unite all these people that we're struggling to hold ourselves together in some ways right now. We're a little bit more fractured, I'm seeing on left, than we were, a year ago or so. But it just, it's just really a testament to what Bernie Sanders was. And I think that, she carries some of that over. But with her critique of Eric London, I thought that it was a very fair, very, as you said, measured. I think she gave him plenty of credit and, credit where credit was due, and call out the parts that were definitely accurate. And she just the real issues that she had was around the quote that we sort of talked about, as far as her accusing, like, trying to hide behind communities of color and Black and brown people, and how you're essentially erasing them out by, if you criticize Joe Biden, you're essentially erasing them.
Which they also called her out for on bad faith, which is kind of the weird thing, is that she, Briahna and Virgil actually criticized AOC quite frequently on that episode. I rewatched it this morning just because after this article, I was like, am I tripping? Like, did I misremember that? Were they worshiping fucking AOC the entire 30 minutes? And no, they weren't. They were actually, being pretty critical of her, pretty snide in their tone towards her. It was only a few instances where they kind of pushed back against Eric London's framing. So I thought it was just weird. And again, this article came off as somewhat petty when Briahna Joy Gray is the kind of person who will use her platform to be like, why isn't AOC, using her text message phone bank to start mass protests out front of Capitol Hill? Like, Briahna Joy Gray is not someone who's apologizing for AOC and the squad's inaction. If anything, she's been on the forefront of pushing AOC and the squad to actually step up to and fulfill their campaign promises. I just thought
even pushing Bernie, I think, because as soon as Bernie, she didn't want him to drop out. When she did, she came out and made that clear. And as soon as he dropped out, her and I would say David Sirota came out and were the loud. David Sirota was his speechwriter, a great investigative journalist, and was Bernie Sanders' speechwriter. And he also immediately came out and began strong, sharp criticisms of Bernie Sanders and his strategy and the immediate capitulation to the Democratic Party and to Joe Biden, without gaining any sort of leverage and any concessions from them on things like legalizing cannabis or, a $15 minimum wage.
Even $15 an hour, which he supposedly got, he didn't get. So
exactly.
Fucking horseshit. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I don't know a ton about Virgil Texas politics, to be honest. I feel like whenever I'm watching clips, he's more there just kind of like making jokes. I don't understand his like bit and character as much. I definitely, I don't have a problem with him at all, but I just like, I feel like I can never tell exactly like if he's being serious or if he's making a joke or like, but I thought that the whole episode, was pretty, again, like Evan said, pretty critical of AOC. So I didn't have a problem with it, and I think it's definitely a little bit of writers.
And not just that, but I think that Briahna Joy Gray did something even more than that, which was to take it a step beyond, and because she had the same criticism of the article that honestly I had, which was that if anything, it didn't make the original interview sound bad enough. Like it actually represented it in a better light than when you go and read the text of the full article. There's actually parts of it that turn out to be worse than what Eric London ended up even framing. And it's like, there's this one part, and I'm sorry that I didn't send this over to you to like, but early on they asked her the question like, what was your path to joining the DSA? Yeah. And they, she launches into this thing where she essentially is saying that she admits that she didn't grow up around like in working class movements or anything like that, but she says that she's essentially framing DSA as like the sort of the only ones that showed up, like they were the only ones that were actually getting stuff done. She says this was around the time when DSA was picketing one of the major camera companies in New York City, trying to call attention to the warehouse workers. And they brought undocumented warehouse workers to the meeting and translated their testimony. And on top of that, the chapter had free childcare provided to anyone who wanted to show up. And that to me, at the end of that meeting, I was like, okay, this is real. There's a lot of people who talk about class issues. There's a lot of people who are deep in the discourse of struggle. But to me, as someone who grew up in these environments, it was the translation to action that was distinctive to me. And I think that that's what made Eric London get in his feelings right there, is that quote right there. I think that's what got Eric London and every socialist organization in their feelings. And I think understandably so, because what she says, it's what's distinctive about the DSA is that they were actually, it was translating to action. And she says that's distinctive. And she says, there's a lot of people who talk about class issues, which is to pretty much paint every other leftist organization. She's saying, there's all these other leftist orgs. And I think that all she needs to do is just clarify here, there are a lot of leftist orgs doing a lot of great work. Socialist alternative, you cannot undercut, the amazing work that they've done. But I just want to do one other quote in the where she talks in response to the question. It says like DSA's priorities really are your priorities as well.
Yeah.
Green New Deal and Medicare for All in particular. There's no getting around the fact that each of those are going to require an act of Congress. What is the most strategic thing that DSA members and chapters could be doing right now to bring that about? And this is where I think that is the worst thing that she said in here. She says, I'm a big believer in exercising a dual approach. First of all, I think you're right. There is no Medicare for all without an act of Congress. The thing is legislation after all. I think sometimes people fall into this trap of wishful thinking about a poll question, thinking that support is solid and that it is unsusceptible to the propaganda of corporate lobbyists in the health insurance industry. I think the first thing we need is real honesty about the work to be done ahead of us. There are some issues that poll really well and the polling is concrete. There are other issues that poll one way or another and the polling can really fluctuate with just one ad campaign. And then she goes on to talk about how Green New Deal is essentially actually popular and she at least does it, all the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, but the thing is that I understand why people are pushing back on this, right? And we did a story on this morning, like AOC giving out the $5,000 to all the candidates that didn't, earn the donations, and her like kind of trying to flex her ability and get committee seats, because that's how you do get committee seats, is you fundraise the hell out of shit. That's how Nancy Pelosi got where she is. She was an amazing fundraiser, right? And I think that all of this shit, not to. The word triggered comes to mind, right? Because that's almost how I feel reading all this shit, because it's like, why the fuck aren't you doing any of this anymore? Why the fuck aren't you walking the walk anymore? Why the fuck are you selling out? Why are you still talking like this when you clearly aren't willing to do these things? Like, that sounds like you gave that fucking interview a long time ago, and it's not reflected by how you're governing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like to what she's suggesting here is to say, she says that she believes in a dual approach, that dual approach being an inside outside strategy. We need people on the inside, working from within the halls of Congress, and people, the mass movement of people on the outside pushing from outside. And then she goes on to cite like polling. But the reality is that the polling on Medicare for All and a Green New Deal are overwhelmingly popular, especially if you look within the Democratic Party, but even across all voters, all Americans, it has majority support, over 60% support amongst independents, Republicans, and Democrats for Medicare for All, and over 50% for Green New Deal. So we're talking about popular policies. $15 minimum wage is even higher than both of those, and so we're talking about really popular policies, which means that we've already done the work of popularizing these things. The people have done the work. That's what we've been doing for the past 4 years. We've been all doing everything we could, knocking doors, making phone calls, organizing however we could, when we could, through a pandemic and all that. And, but what she's doing is she's saying, oh, I believe in a dual approach, but says nothing about what they need to be doing and what strategy they should be doing and what work they should be doing. And it's all, it's the poll numbers. The poll numbers might look like it's popular, but it's not really that popular.
Well, it's exactly what she is. She's obfuscating. She's pushing the blame away from her. She's doing exactly what Joe Biden and all the other fucking Democrats do, which is, work harder as activists and make us do it. No, do your fucking job and do it in the first place. But,
they always point to some vague organizing. We always, she mentions it like, and that's why we have to engage in the work of organizing, she says. It's like, what organizing? We've done the organizing. That the organizing is all, we were organizing around force to vote. You spit in our face when we were organizing around force to vote. You denounced it and you spoke out against it and you propagandized against
real
it.
Real activists, Kamali, real activists do what the fuck I want them to do. Okay? They shut the fuck up when I tell them to do.
Exactly. They never criticize, how dare they criticize? And so so it's just like, it's that kind of, that attitude of like acting like pushing the blame onto the masses of people and onto the powerless, and ignoring the powerful who are actually sitting there in the walls of Congress, and not shifting any kind of, blame on them, and not talking about any form of strategy here. There's no, okay, well, this is how we're going to do it to actually get a $50 minimum wage, Medicare for all, Green New Deal. It's just, you guys keep on organizing more, and just keep on organizing. And she even says, and getting more candidates elected. And if we go at the pace that we're going right now of getting these candidates elected every year, it would literally take us about 100 years to get majority control with progressives.
I think ultimately the big tension here with the whole World Socialist website versus Briahna Joy Gray, and this is my opinion at least, it seems like there's some tension here because they don't like it, or Eric London, and by extension the Socialist Equality Party, which he's a part of, is just very against this notion that any Democratic candidate, Bernie Sanders included, is really just sheep herding people into the Democratic Party, and it's all just like a neoliberal imperialist project dressed up as progressivism and all this stuff. Here he says, when Barack Obama declared himself as the candidate of hope and change, he was acting in bad faith. When Bernie Sanders presented himself as the leader of the political revolution, he was acting in bad faith. And then it mentions that he maneuvered his supporters behind Hillary. And while I agree with that criticism that he shouldn't necessarily have maneuvered his supporters behind Hillary, I still supported Bernie Sanders, and I think it's kind of dumb to pretend like people shouldn't have supported Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020 when he clearly was the best shot that the left had at getting someone that could be considered a leftist with leftist values into an executive position of power. So I feel like almost he's kind of taking out this strategic, or this difference he has with Briahna Joy Gray, who was, of course, the campaign press secretary and associated with Bernie Sanders. I almost feel like he's taking out this strategic difference they have, in that he just refuses to work with any Democrat or anyone running as a Democrat, point blank, whereas Briahna Joy Gray clearly did not rule that out, as was proven by her involvement with Bernie 2020. So I just, that's just a point of difference I have with Eric London. And I guess that's where we part ways, and I can see how if that is your, hard held view, then you might have some issues with the way Briahna Joy Gray framed things. Personally, here at the Vanguard, Zach and I pretty much are in agreement that it doesn't really matter what the fuck party you're running for.
Grilled cheese sandwich party, man.